We're going to start. We have two interesting lectures right now, 20-minute, 15-minute, 20-minute from two esteemed guests. And they will be focusing on the energy sector and regulation in Lebanon, as well as on the policy dimension. I would like to invite Mr. Pierre Khouri and Dr. Hassan Harajli to come forward. Mr. Pierre Khouri, very brief introduction. Mr. Pierre Khouri is the General Director and President of the Board of Lebanese Center for Energy Conservation, Lebanon's national energy agency hosted by the Ministry of Energy and Water. And his lecture titled, The Development of Renewable Energy Projects in Lebanon, National Targets and Way Forward. And Dr. Hassan Harajli is the UNDP Lebanon Office Energy Advisor and Project Manager of the UNDP CEDRO project since 2009. And Dr. Hassan's intervention is titled Independent Regulator or Regulation by Contract for the Lebanese Electricity Generation Sector. It's supposed to be a question, I didn't do that. A call for local research and dialogue. So please, Mr. Pierre Khouri, it's your
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation, and thank you for being here. Practically in the next 15 minutes or so, we'll try to cover a new initiative, a new framework initiative by LCEC, which we call the Next Steps. Definitely it's related to renewable energy and energy efficiency and sustainability at a larger scale, but it focuses on an action plan for 2020, a strategy for 2025, and a vision for 2030. And this, I think I need to point. And this Next Steps initiative, practically it goes in harmony with the proposed title for the presentation, which talks about national targets and way forward. But in the next few slides, we'll be focusing on the way forward. So we're doing it the other way around, starting by the way forward and then coming back to the existing situation, to the national targets, and hopefully coming up with a conclusion that would fit into this regional momentum created by the ENEPLAN initiative at the university's level. Okay. So for those who know Lebanon, back in 2009, Lebanon at the level of the government has set a vision to reach 12% of renewable energy by 2020. Then a strategy followed up by the Ministry of Energy and Water in 2010 detailing the main axis of work to reach our national targets. And in 2015, a detailed action plan, including concrete actions and projects, also came up to see how Lebanon could reach the 2020 objectives. So practically we had a follow-up or a series of actions at the national level to reach our 2020 objectives. However, today in 2018, things have become clearer, and it's really the time to fit a new strategy, a new vision, and a new action plan for the country. So the action plan is another commitment or reaffirmation that Lebanon will meet its objectives for 2020. So we're not avoiding our 2020 targets. On the contrary, we're reaffirming our 2020 objectives. We are developing a strategy that would include the major projects, and we'll be talking about this for the period 2021-2025, and hopefully a 2030 vision that would fit into the climate action or the climate change momentum that Lebanon is participating in at the international level. So what is the next steps? The next steps is an integrated approach developed by the LCEC and aiming at creating a harmonious and rapid development of sustainable energy in Lebanon based on a clear and interrelated vision, strategy, and action plan or plans, depending on energy efficiency, because it includes energy efficiency and renewable energy. So the next steps, we do know that the next steps cannot be materialized without being adopted at the legislative, administrative, and financial levels of the Lebanese government, and this is the work of LCEC for the next few years. And the terminology here is really meaningful By legislative, we mean decisions by the laws and regulations by the Lebanese parliament. We mean decisions by the Council of Ministers. At the political level, we mean the support of all concerned administrations and ministries, and which we are receiving at this stage, and we hopefully will continue to receive at further steps. Administrative, meaning the decisions and the actions by the different involved administration. And practically in terms of energy efficiency, we have a lot of concern and a lot of interest in working with the Higher Council for Urban Planning, and which Dr. Mukhtar has mentioned earlier, how to integrate renewable energy in a more in the bigger picture, including landscape, water use, and the use of resources. So, the main milestones or the main building blocks of the next steps. One is linking short-term actions to long-term outcomes, meaning that the action of today needs to reflect the vision of tomorrow. Things are already coordinated since today. From today until 2030, things need to be clear, need to be implemented according to a clear vision and to a clear action plan. Second is integrating sustainable energy development into the national energy map, which means to develop a national configuration of supply and demand, including transportation. Because in the past years, we avoided working in the transportation sector. Now it's time to include the transportation sector and to have a clear or to interlink the supply of energy at all levels and the demand for energy. 3, interrelating sustainable energy with oil and gas exploration development program. And Lebanon is going to have oil and gas, and this is very important. It's a strategic shifting in the history of Lebanon, and we need to integrate sustainable energy to highlight the national policy or the national developments in terms of oil and gas. 4 is twinning sustainable energy development with the electricity sector development. And this, honestly, as LCEC, we were trying to avoid for the past few years. We were working on an island mode. Now we know that we have to dare and work on integrating energy, sustainable energy projects with the development of the conventional electricity sector, and we know that this is not an easy task. 5 is presenting sustainable energy as a serious alternative to power outages. Again, since 2009, or since 2005, when LCEC was created as a UNDP project, we were trying to promote and market renewable energy and energy efficiency as a source for clean energy. All the time, we avoided using renewable energy as an alternative to power outages. Starting today, sustainable energy, renewable energy projects will be an alternative to power outages. Ensuring national funding for sustainable energy projects, and this is a new task which we already initiated during our work with the Energy Committee as the Lebanese Parliament. It will be reinitiated, and the idea is to have laws by the Lebanese Parliament to include national funding for sustainable energy projects. Adopting aggressive targets for sustainable energy by enforcement actions. Most of the initiatives undertaken in Lebanon previously used to work or to be based on incentives. Incentives will continue, but again, now is the time to have enforcements, to have new laws which will oblige people to abide by energy efficiency and renewable energy actions. And last but not least, mirroring international climate change requirements. And Lebanon needs to adopt the highest standards in terms of climate change commitments, specifically related to renewable energy and energy efficiency. So these building blocks would allow us to have a different picture. The existing pictures today is, our target is 12% of renewable energy by 2020, and another target is 15% by 2030, and which is already 15% is a bit aggressive. But we do believe that Lebanon can reach the 3,000 kilotons of oil equivalent by 2030. And if the demand in 2030 is 11,000 kilotons of oil equivalent, we're talking about a target of 27% by 2030. And we believe that having an absolute value, which is the 3,000 kilotons of oil equivalent, is much easier and much more meaningful than having a percentage, because the percentage depends a lot on the demand, which is 11,000 here, and we're really not sure if it's going to be 11,000 or not. So a new target that we'll be working on, or that we are actually working on, is the 3,000 kilotons of oil equivalent. How are we going to do these next steps? So in partnership with the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, based in Abu Dhabi, by the end of this month at the International Beirut Energy Forum, we'll be launching the two main flagship studies of IRENA, which is the Renewable Readiness Assessment, RAA, of Lebanon, and the Renewable Energy Roadmap, REMAP, of Lebanon, which include a set of tasks that will be done with the support of IRENA to develop the next steps, to develop them in detail in order to reach the next steps. Revisiting the technology share for 2020, the graph on the right side is the target, or represents the target for different technologies by 2020. Now we do believe that the actual targets will change according to this, to the left side numbers. Just to give you an example, we had as an objective that wind will represent 17% of the 12%. Practically now we believe that wind will be around 28%. This is just an example that things are being monitored on a day-to-day approach. So what are the main aspects of the national roadmap? What has Lebanon achieved till today? And what are the next steps? First, Lebanon succeeded in terms of renewable energy to set up a successful public-private partnership where we're expecting around $1.7 billion of investment to be done by the private sector. This is not by the public government. Second is the ability of a legal and political framework. Clause 462, 288, and 54, and the different decisions by the Council of Ministers have allowed Lebanon to sign the first 3 wind farm contracts, the first in its history, thanks to these 3 laws. And I think our friend Dr. Hassan will be talking about this issue in more detail. So I'll jump to another idea, which is the creation of a suitable and credible national process. And this suitable and credible national process has attracted really a huge number of financing institutions like EBRD, EIB, AFD, IFC, the World Bank Group. Now the Danish are here, the Spanish are contacting us. Everybody is interested in financing projects in Lebanon. And finally, it's about economical and financial viability. The cost that the government is paying for a kilowatt, for a unit of energy from renewable energy sources is less than the cost paid or the selling price paid by EDL, our national electric utility. So this is part of the next step. This is the process that we followed for the wind farm. We will not go into the detail, but the message here is to say that we have a clear process. This process has been implemented as planned, and it has led to a successful the first power purchase agreements for wind farm. So what are the elements of bankability? What makes these projects bankable from the international financing institutions' point of view? The power purchase agreement done in Lebanon, the investors are signing, or they signed a contract with the government of Lebanon, represented by the Ministry of Energy and Water. This is really ensuring for investors and banks as well. EDL, Electricité du Liban, has signed an accession agreement to enter into the contract. Again, it was signed and it's operational now. 3, the government has allowed the creation of special purpose vehicle companies to give flexibility to the investors and to allow to attract international investors into the power purchase agreements. And 4, and most importantly, we are working with the Ministry of Environment on applying a strict environmental and social impact assessment, including a bird migration protocol, which is extremely important in the case of wind farm. And this will be the case also with solar farms, regarding, again, what the Dean Mukhtar has mentioned regarding the use of resources, land resources, agriculture, land resources, trees, forestation, and the use of water resources. So today we're at a promising step, we're at a promising phase. We signed, or the Lebanese government has signed, 3 contracts to develop 200 megawatts of wind farms. Currently, we're evaluating offers to build 12 solar farms with a total of 180 megawatt, which will be followed by an extension of another 12 solar farms. We also have new rounds for wind farms, 200 to 400 megawatts, and a third round of solar farm with storage. And you can see from the number of expressions of interest or the companies which which showed their interest in participating, that Lebanon is attracting a lot of international and international investors, and the numbers here are a nice indicator about that. So this is our 2020 action plan. It reflects different projects that hopefully Lebanon will implement by 2020, and it also shows the different projects that will be implemented in 2025. And here we have a question: how do we integrate with EDL? Is this going to hinder the process, or are we going to be able to do that? This is the next challenge, but at least at the level of LCEC, at the level of the Ministry of Energy and Water, we are going to take this challenge, and we believe that things will be hopefully working as needed. Just to come back to this gathering of elite people from the research and universities, we know that wind, solar, PV, solar water heaters are mature technologies, but we do also know that we need a lot of efforts in the remaining technology, in the remaining part of the renewable energy scene in terms of biomass, waste to energy. It's not water to energy, it's waste to energy. It's to hydropower, geothermal, and new technologies. We do know that we need research, we need the role of universities is essential here, and we do want universities and researchers to be involved in developing these technologies. Just regarding job creation, again, because we're at AUB, and AUB is a university where we have new graduates, we know that at the level of decentralized project development in Lebanon, we have hundreds of jobs that were created in terms of energy efficiency project and also renewable energy projects. Now, the market is also expanding or extending to include architects and urban planners, and this is again another positive signal. Last, I think the last few slides about energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is always the black sheep of the sustainable energy market, but energy efficiency is a serious game changer. And this is again part of our action plan for 2020. And the importance of energy efficiency is that it has a huge impact on the calculation of RE targets, of renewable energy targets, because it reduces enormously the demand, and therefore the share of renewable energy could be even higher. And this is again part of our national energy efficiency action plan. This is the final graph, is about the development of sustainable energy investments in project. You can see there's a continuous increase in investments today, like actually today, September 2018, investments for the past, I would say 5 years have exceeded $700 million of actual project implementation. And this is extremely encouraging, and hopefully things will continue at this level. So this is my presentation. The next steps, this is our new initiative. We do hope that everybody will be involved in this initiative. And just to finish with this military maxim, no plan survives the battle. So we know that our plan will be changing, will be modified, but we do hope we are in the middle of the battle. And we do hope that we will win it for the sake of our country, of our economy, and hopefully our environment. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. And first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to take part of this important talk. I'm going to talk a bit about regulation in Lebanon, specifically in the energy sector. And my presentation really has no answers. As you rightly said, Yasser, it's just asking a question out there. First of all, to reform a power sector, and we all heard or are hearing recently about Sadr and the conference of Sadr, and there's a lot of focus on reforming the power sector. Reforming the power sector can take many shapes and forms. On the one end, you have the vertically integrated monopoly, the company, and on the other end, you have complete retail power, meaning that, for example, when I was living in England, studying in England, I changed my utility 2 times. So I'm not happy, the prices were too high. I just called another company, and overnight, the next day, I started to be billed by a new private sector firm. So between these two extremes, you have many, many options. You have the first one, that you have a purchasing agency that can also be a national generation company, transmission company, and distribution company, or any combination of them. 2, wholesale power competition, where power suppliers actually submit their prices to deliver power on the next day, for example, up to the point where demand is met. So these are the many options that usually power reform has. One thing that is agreed upon in the literature, the only thing that's agreed upon in the literature, is that we need to move away from the vertically integrated electricity supply. And why is that? I would like to take just a bit of time to read each and every one of these blocks. Power supply has deteriorated to critically low levels and has been failing to meet national needs in most developing nations. Many of these countries have experienced power shortages and interruptions. Their power generating plants emit toxic pollutants. Their power tariffs do not cover the costs. The power sector drains the government fiscal resources. Many citizens, especially in rural areas, lack access to electricity supply, and electricity is widely stolen by customers, frequently with the active support of existing employees. Their power utilities are bankrupt. Now, this is not a study about Lebanon. It's a general study about the developing world by the World Bank in 2006, but as if they're talking about this nation, unfortunately. Just a few numbers. Okay, so we all know we import a high percentage of our demand from oil. And hopefully this picture will change with all the renewable energy integration that Pierre just discussed. Our fuel imports for the energy sector, for the power sector, depending on the oil price, ranges between 3 to 8% of our GDP. 8 to 23% of our Lebanon's trade deficit is due to this oil import bill. 40 to 45% of our national debt so far, which is around 85 billion, is due to the fuel subsidies that go to EDL. 6 to 11% of household income goes to secure electricity only. And with a simple calculation, you can say that the fuel subsidies subdue at least 140,000 employment opportunities in this nation, in this country. Okay, so reforming the power sector, usually, unfortunately, you don't have one size fits all. Different power sectors, they differ in size, in structure, in the existing resource mix. And to complicate things matter, different countries have different experiences, skilled human resources, and institutional endowment and economic endowment. So we really cannot take anything done outside and fit it to the Lebanese case. The current Lebanese power regulations that Pierre also talked about, basically, in Lebanon we have a law. We have Law 462, and we had it for since 2002, so maybe 16 years now. And this law stipulated the establishment of a national regulatory authority that has the responsibility to issue licenses for power generation from the private sector. But this law is out there, it's ratified by Parliament, and it's never implemented. And in Lebanon, this is a common problem, not also in the energy sector. For those of you who have kids, you may have read this story about going on a bear hunt with your children. And the theme is that going on this bear hunt, they meet many obstacles, and they can't go over them, they can't go under them, they can't go around them, and they have to go through them. But for regulation in Lebanon, unfortunately, they're doing everything except implementing them. They're going over them, under them, around them, but they're not implementing them. And this is an issue. This is a political issue. So Lebanon, in its place, has issued Law 288, which was extended by Law 54, which is now obsolete, but hopefully it will be renewed soon, where the Council of Ministers will receive proposals to license renewable energy projects based on joint proposals by the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Energy and Water. But also the implementation clauses of this law were not stipulated. And here the LCAC and Pierre have been playing a big part in moving forward this particular law, without which, by the way, I don't think anything would have happened so far. So this lack of clarity with respect to electricity regulation is a barrier towards reform, and we need to address these, because lack of reform means anything that is bid, invested, will have a higher price. And this is from a study that we did last year about de-risking renewable energy investments. When you invest in renewable energy power, very briefly, you have rich people who put money and the banks who put money. Rich people will want a higher return on their money when the risks are higher, and the banks want a higher return when the risks that they assume is higher. And you can see that if you compare Lebanon to a best-in-case country, our rate of return required for such investments is particularly high. There's, of course, the political risk, which is very high. You never know when another war will happen, or the internal political bickering and what have you. But also, we have a grid transmission risk, which is very high. And it's important that EDL, as Pierre said, that we have to involve EDL and modernize EDL to be able to take in all these renewable energy projects. But also the regulatory risk is also something important as well. Okay, so the government, the Ministry of Energy and Water, is going about issuing, and they've successfully issued the first wind farm contract through what's known as regulation by contract. So there are mixed messages when you regulate in this way. On the one hand, we have to learn from the Asian independent power producer model. In this model, there were many generation companies who were given long-term power agreements for 20 or so years. But then when the financial crisis hit the Asian countries in 1990, there were many problems. First, there was no explicit regulation of anything other than generation price, so you fixed your price for 20 years. And second, there were no procedures in place for handling shocks. What's important to know, and this is extremely important for the Ministry of Energy and Water to know, is that up to 60% of concession contracts, including IPPs, are renegotiated within 3 years. One of the major reasons to therefore establish an independent regulatory institution that is well designed and managed is related to the inherent difficulties in writing time-consistent, enforceable long-term contracts for 20 years plus ahead that can realistically cover all the issues that may change in the future or that we may face in the future. Evidence has it that contract renegotiation is more likely to take place in the absence of this particular regulator. But on the other hand, as well, and this is why I don't have answers, I have questions, we cannot, as I say, just implement something from outside here. The issue of institutional endowment is very important. We need to have a strong legal system, effective courts, and an independent legal system. This is a prerequisite for having an independent regulatory authority. Also in small countries like Lebanon, the relationship between on the one hand, the political side, and on the other hand, the institutional side is very close. So if we do establish a regulatory authority, how independent would it be? And this case, we've had cases in Lebanon that unfortunately tell us that they're not politically independent. Another one is the size of our country. Competition is very important, but if you build a 1,000 megawatt power plant, chances are you're going to get cheaper prices than if you build a 100 megawatt electricity plant. So there are economies of scale. So how much can you really incentivize competition is also a question to be answered. And last but not least, when we hopefully establish a regulatory authority, and as the ministry has learned through this WIN process, there's so many things that need to be learned, so many different types of experiences that are required, be it financial, accounting, legal, etc., etc., etc. These are very important. And it's a question whether Lebanon has this experience, and it's only just beginning to gain this experience. So at the end, really, the question whether to implement Law 462 and establish independent regulatory authority, or to extend the use of contract regulation through Law 54, needs more research. It needs a stepping up of research institutes such as AUB, to study the pros and cons of different options, to study from other nations what's been happening. The World Bank has some very important studies along these lines that can form the beginning of this research. So, yes, that's it. Basically, it's a call for research. Again, as long as the politicians don't implement Law 462, there is a gap, there is a problem. This problem is being filled by the Ministry of Energy and Water and the LCEC, who had they not stepped in, then nothing would have happened in this sector, but something is happening. But eventually, for reform to take place, we need to address the issue of having an independent regulator. Thank you.
We'll open it. Before we open it for questions, I would like really urge everyone, just please silence your phones. I would really greatly appreciate it, as well as the audience. I think we had two excellent presentations, one on our targets in renewable energies, and the second ones are the mishaps or what needs really to be done at the regulatory level. And I think these are two great starting presentations for us. And I don't know if anyone has a question, would like to clarify something, just to open it up for discussion for the next 5 or 10 minutes before actually we get our coffee break. So, anyone? Yeah, Dr. Huda.
Okay. For the last presentation, I asked you mean that we have to renew the rules and have special regulators. This should be addressed by the academic, you said, and the researcher. In which field do you think the technical have a role in this, the technical engineering, or it should go to the faculty of law and the law people to work on that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. In fact, you need to have diverse people to work on this. You need economists, you need technical people who know the power grid, the power system, and of course you need the legal part as well. So an interdisciplinary institution will combine these elements and could be an institution to take these laws. It's nothing new what I'm saying. Research has done a lot on this, but I just feel it's a bit lacking in Lebanon to assess, because on the one hand, really, the experiences in independent independent regulators outside power has not been that positive. So we need to really see whether it is the right thing to do independent regulatory authority or to continue regulation as Pierre has said in his presentation. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, Dr. Ahmad.
Thanks for the presentations. I think that with respect to the Lebanon, you need maybe some regulations as we have like in Jordan with respect to the renewable energy. So when we have in 2012 the regulations for renewable energy, it was the mechanism for developing this sector in the whole country. Irrespective of the regulations is dependent or independent, but I think that real regulations will be the main force towards maybe achievement of like a large portions of renewable energy in the whole country. So my questions about how are the efforts now to have like some laws, directives with respect to the renewable energy in the country? Where you are in this?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question and the comment. Yes, indeed, Jordan is a very successful example in terms of developing renewable energy project, and we are learning a lot, honestly, from the Jordanian experience. We have a lot of coordination and work together with our colleagues from Jordan, Dr. Ziad Sabra, and many other administrators or people working in the administration there. So practically, to answer the question, Lebanon is working on a new law to have a framework for having new projects, and this law or this draft law was approved by the Council of Ministers, the previous government, and now hopefully it will be approved in the first session of the first meeting of the Lebanese Parliament. So I will go back to what Hassan has mentioned in his presentation. There need to be a lot of developments at the legislative level, but we are trying to have projects implemented using the existing regulations and new regulations that will open the door for new investments. Thank you.
Other questions? I have a question. Oh, Petra, go ahead.
I can use the microphone one more. I wanted to ask about all the studies that are being done about the impact assessment of the wind farms, the solar farms. Are they commissioned already, or are there any studies that are planned on impact?
All major projects in Lebanon need to have an ESIA, the Environmental and Social Impact Assessment, and this is a requirement, again, thanks to a decree by the Lebanese government. And the ESIA is now under preparation. 3 ESIAs are now under preparation and will be submitted to the Ministry of Environment by November 2018. So the 3 wind farm developers, each one is developing an ESIA, and the Ministry of Environment and the international financing institutions have asked for a joint strategic EIA, because birds will pass through the first wind farm, then the next and the third. So we have also a joint ESIA. So the 4 studies, each for every farm, and the joint one are now under preparation by the developers and will be submitted to the Ministry of Environment by November. And these projects, the wind farm project or any other renewable energy project, cannot be financed if the EIA is not approved by the Ministry of Environment. Cannot be.
Any other questions? Dr. Anna.
With the assessment of all these new plans, development projects, the government, the local level, who is
just to mention one thing, in Lebanon it's very centralized, so we don't have decentralized powers, meaning the government needs to approve all these PPP, public-private partnership projects. The government needs to approve them. As Dr. Hassan has mentioned in his presentation, it needs to be based on a proposal by the Ministry of Energy and Water and the Ministry of Finance. The actual work is being done inside the Ministry of Energy and Water, it's a technical issue, so it's done inside the Ministry of Energy and Water. But before going to the government, to the Council of Ministers, we need the approval and the signature of the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you. I think one doctor, he talked today about the relationship between land use planning and energy management. I think it's a very important issue. I would like to ask, where are you now in this? Because I think it's very important. Thank you.
Okay. Again, all projects need to have an environmental and social impact assessment. And these two aspects, the environmental and the social sides, include resource management, land management, water management, or the impact of renewable energy on these projects. But to have, again, like you've mentioned, and like Dean Mukhtar has mentioned, to have a clear relation or a clear link between renewable energy and water, land, and other aspects is not mandatory yet. So this is again a call to you, to researchers, to university professors, to work on having an integrated approach to see the impact, whether it's positive or negative, both impacts of renewable energy projects on the use of resources, water, land, and other aspects.
Okay. Any other questions?
Considering this huge gap between the plans and the, if I may say, the wishful thinking that we're all working on, and the operational weakness of the institution and the political problem, as Dr. Khouri said, how can we mainstream those plans into faster implementation, or at least easier application or taking into consideration?
Thank you, Mr. Amin. Practically, it's not wishful thinking. Honestly, things are being implemented according to plans. The wishful thinking now is for the 2025 period, because the more renewable energy projects we have, the more harder it's going to be to work with EDL. This is so. For 2010, 2020, our wishful thinking came into reality, so we turned our thinking into reality, and this is a fact. Now, the wishful thinking for the next phase is going to be more complicated, because you need to involve EDL, and you need to work on the network. The electricity network is very technical, but this is a very important aspect. This is why, since now, we are launching this vision, this strategy, and this action plan. And since now we are saying it's time to start working with the EDL on a daily basis. And this is again what Hassan has mentioned in his presentation. A renewal of EDL is needed. You cannot avoid renewing EDL in order to implement the new projects or to integrate the new renewable energy projects.
I just want to add something to what Pierre said. When the wind projects were out, I think the winning bidder won around 9 cents, 9 point something cents. And the government currently's power is around 16 cents, 17 cents with the current the tariff. And when the tariff goes back up, it goes to 26. So it's much cheaper. And now when the LCC and the ministry open the financials of the solar, I think it's going to do some repercussions in the country with the prices that we will see. I mean, in working in this sector, I know a bit of people who submitted and know their prices, Pierre does as well. He likes to keep them as a surprise, I will too. But when this happens, when the prices are open, we cannot look at renewable energy anymore and say, oh, this is an add-on, this is a luxury, this is a niche. It makes economic sense, and it will be stupid, sorry for this word, not to go ahead and to do as much as possible renewable energy. And what's important about Pierre's presentation is that they're beginning to think of storage as well, utility scale storage, just to make sure that this renewable energy can be better integrated technically into the grid. Thank you.
Any other questions? Dr. Farid.
Yes, my question is about the people who are implementing, for example, the impact assessments, the land use, and the skills that they have. And the question is about what, if anything, you need from, let's say, universities and in terms of training the people to ensure that you have the right skills to move forward with these plans.
Honestly, there's many times graduates who are graduating, for example, engineers, who work in this sector. They tend to be really beefed up in terms of their practical experience and the use of many softwares that could be used in real life situations. So there's a kind of a weakness going on, and especially with the graduates, which I'm hearing from the companies who work in this sector. So it's important that institutions, you know, this is why sometimes they have a placement year outside where students work with industry before they finish their degree. It's very important that the university focus on practical experience for its students and make them work as much as possible before they finish their degree. So this is just from one aspect of it.
Again, very quickly, honestly, I don't know the answer about what type of specialties are needed, but I do know the negative impacts that our projects could have. I know that wind farms could have a negative impact on forestation, on bird, on bats, on the vegetation. So probably universities and researchers should tell us what specialty is needed. I know that solar farms will have a huge impact on land use because we need huge amounts of land. So again, this could change the ecosystem. So again, probably some type of specialties are related to the social impact because you're affecting cities and villages, but you're also affecting the forestation, you're affecting the use of agricultural lands. So this is probably the type of specialties that would be required in order to counterbalance our negative impacts.
Could I add something to this? I think this whole, I mean, what you both are talking about is the idea of calling on universities to actually contribute to this. My question is a bit twofold. I mean, have your institutions actually approached universities to do this, number one? And number two, you know a little bit our mentality here. If I need to do a certain research, for example, the wind farms, you know, they have been bid. If I come to you and ask you, could you provide me with data, not sensitive data, but data and information that I can advance your thinking and do my research as well? Is that possibility there? Would be willing to coordinate and cooperate? Because I mean, at the bottom line, it's good to do all these calls, but how do we move it into action? I think that's the important piece of all the story. So how can we do that? Are your institutions willing to move forward with this?
Definitely, we are ready to move forward, and this is why we are here, because we're participating, because we believe in partnerships, and we do have, at least LCEC has a number of partnerships with universities like AUB, like I can mention them, UZEC, BAU, Lebanese universities. We have all the time around 6 to 7 interns working at LCEC all year round. Definitely, most of them are from the engineering sector, like engineering branches, but also to some extent the environmental background, like environmental specialists. So LCEC is open to partnerships, and this is why we are here. And the second thing, LCEC has an open book policy, so all our studies, all the info, the data that we have it and we share it. It's part of our philosophy to share data, even if it's a wrong data, because by challenging people with wrong data, you can get back the correct ones and use it and make it public.
Well, I have a proposal ready. I'll be sending that to you.
Please,
very specific data that I need.
Please do. Please do.
Already.
Please do.
My second question is, you know, the way if I combine both presentations together, if I start from a point, I see renewable energy going in one direction, I see EDL, or Electricité du Liban, going in another direction, and regulations going into another direction. And I know that's the tough question, and this is part of, I think, Dr. Harajli could not answer. But at least as a quick closing to this session, how can all of these become, and I think that touches upon the mainstreaming question that came before, how could all of these converge together? Because we need them to converge. There's no way for us to move forward if they don't converge. And, you know, I know we've got political hurdles. I know that, and that's one of probably the main ones. But how can we move forward with this?
Okay.
You can ask the question.
Honestly, honestly, we have to learn, as Lebanese, we have to learn that we have to abide by the law. There's a law in Parliament, and Parliament is the #1 institution in Lebanon. You cannot have any politician, and I'm not only talking about the current politician, because this has been the case since 2002, who can decide whether to implement the law or not. If you don't like the law, implement it and then suggest amendments in Parliament to this law. You cannot not implement it. And so this is a key message, that if you want really reform, and as I said, the numbers speak for themselves. 140,000 jobs at least, and this is just quick calculations, are suppressed because of this electricity situation. So it is a crime, in my opinion, that should not continue. But unfortunately, I mean, we all know the general political atmosphere in the country. So it's really a political decision.
Okay. Yeah, yes.
Typically, I'm more optimistic than Hassan. Just to answer your question, no, EDL is supportive and EDL is cooperative. And one main indicator that was mentioned is that EDL has signed the accession agreement, and now EDL acceded to this PPA, and it's doing its job, just to give credit to EDL. But what we're saying, and this goes with the comment of Mr. Najib, the exponentially growth, the expected exponentially growth in the implementation of project will need EDL to move at an exponential rate. This is our next challenge for the next time. Upscaling, exactly. This is we always keep saying it's time to upscale, and this is the idea. So we need EDL to upscale its activities and its content and its structure, and we believe that EDL will be able to do it. And the most important message, and this is a closing statement, is that the role of universities and researchers and projects like ENEPLAN is to be able to give us the new blood, the new graduates, the new researchers, the new studies, the new ideas, in order to keep this momentum in the environmental frameworks that we'd like to see for the next decade. Thank you.
I think we can close this session, and just join me in thanking both our speakers here. And I would like to invite everyone for our coffee break.